Welcome to Worth Live, and thank you all for joining this week's episode of the Next Normal series on why you should consider embracing the anti-retirement movement. Firstly, I hope you and your loved ones are keeping well during what continues to be a challenging time for so many people. I'm Juliet Scott-Croxford, CEO at Worth Media, and I'm thrilled to be joined by our special guests today, Patti and Milledge Hart, co-authors of book The Resolutionist, Welcome to the Anti-Retirement Movement, and Kathleen Entwistle, Managing Director and Private Wealth Advisor at Morgan Stanley Private Wealth Management. Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Hi, how are you?
Great, thank you. And good to have you on here, both of you. And hi, Kathy.
Hey, Juliet.
Our intention at Worth is to create conversations that help inspire and inform our community, many of whom are business leaders, investors, and entrepreneurs who want to leave a positive impact on the world and to help create a more inclusive and equal economy and society for the benefit of everyone. And we call that Worth Beyond Wealth. So we hope you enjoy the session and find it valuable. Forward thinking has been the essence of this series that we launched almost a year ago now, where Worth is looking ahead to what the world looks like in this new environment that we're now all living in. Retirement often gets viewed as the end of one's professional life and the beginning of full-time leisure in one's life. It's what people work so hard throughout their career to achieve. But what if retirement could still be productive, engaging, and full of adventure, not unlike what you had during your career? We're thrilled to be joined by Patti and Milledge Hart and Kathleen Entwistle as we discuss today the Hart's latest book and what we're terming the anti-retirement movement, what it is, why it's exciting, and how it can lead you to a fulfilling and engaging post-retirement life. So many of you will be familiar with this format by now. A few housekeeping rules. Please set your chat to all panelists and attendees. We'd love to hear from you. Any comments or questions that you have for the speakers, share in there, or you can use the Q&A. We'll weave those into the conversation as we go, and we'll also allow some time at the end for questions too. So let's get started. Firstly, a personal check-in with you all, and also just a bit about your background and experience. Patti and Milledge, love to start with you, sort of what you did pre the book, and also sort of how the last year has been for you. Patti, why don't we start with you?
Sure. So pre becoming a resolutionist, I spent my career in the technology sector. I had the great privilege of serving in 4 different CEO roles for 4 different public companies, from very small to fully formed, and everything in between. So that's really where I made my way ahead of becoming a resolutionist. I think how I'm doing, it's interesting. As Milledge and I wrote this book, we came up with our 12 resolutions, which are to some degree resolutions that help you through a transition. And so as COVID started to set in last year, we one day on a walk said, we should pull our resolutions out because they might be helpful in helping us really manage through this COVID situation. So we actually have leaned on our own resources and research to make our way through to really enjoy and reflect during this time.
And Juliet, for me, my career was primarily in banking. The last banking thing I did, I founded an investment bank focused on mergers and acquisitions. We ultimately sold that bank kind of concurrently with moving into the next phase of our life. And I think it's a great question about how we're doing now. Patti and I have been impacted by COVID with family and friends in dramatic ways, just like everybody else in this call. But we set our mind to making the most of this opportunity to be together kind of every minute of every day, to continue to learn and continue to improve ourselves and try to make the world a better place. So we've been trying to ace COVID, even though it's been a very challenging time.
It feels like a very timely moment as well, because I suspect there are many people that are sort of rethinking their plans, particularly after the last 12 months as well. And I know we'll do a poll in a minute about where people are at in terms of thinking about retirement and whether that's changed. Kathy, I'd love to introduce you next. How are you doing? And also, you work with many individuals and families, so I imagine this conversation comes up a lot in the planning, in the financial planning space. But yeah, please share with the audience who you are, what you do, and a bit about your background.
Sure. So I'm a private wealth advisor at Morgan Stanley. I've been working with families, individuals, C-suite executives, founders, all sorts of different people who have the same purpose for coming to me, and that is to try to help them navigate their financial picture and reach certain goals. And we do that by understanding their priorities first when it comes to their goals and values. And clearly the conversation today is going to be very much wrapped around goals and values and the best ways to be able to enjoy what's most important to you and to plan for it appropriately.
Thank you. So let's start with the context. What exactly is the anti-retirement movement and a resolutionist? And where did you get the idea from?
Yeah, so the movement is really, what we see as a groundswell of this group of people that are in some cases retiring younger, in all cases living longer, to really redefine this chapter of our lives. We did not like the word retirement. If you look it up in the dictionary, it means go to sleep. In sports, it means you strike out a batter or you surrender a tennis match. And we didn't really think of ourselves in that way. We actually thought we were now going to live 30 years likely in this phase of life, continuing to learn and grow and give back, right? And challenge ourselves with adventures. So we settled on the word resolutionist because we thought that it felt bold, which it does, but also because we really felt like at this stage of life, we have to be a bit more resolute in the way we live our lives, right? You don't have structure around you the way you did when you were working full time. So the discipline and being resolute and purposeful in how you live every day is a bit more critical at this stage.
And we just thought there's no way that retirement captured the phase of life that we're entering. And because we're both very involved with boards and some nonprofits and, in a lot of ways trying to make the world a better place. And so retirement didn't capture that. So anti-retirement seemed like a better answer.
I love it. And Kathy, have you experienced over the past 12 months, some of your clients or friends sort of saying, actually, I'm rethinking this whole retirement thing?
Absolutely. I think COVID has really made us stop and think about a lot of things. And even going into 2021, a lot of people thought, okay, now, new year, it's finally going to get better. And we find ourselves on this, we're in the same spot, just maybe in a different view right now. So I think it's really made a lot of people think about what's super important to them and how they want to live their life. And a lot of times we get caught up in the day-to-day and we forget about what's important to us. So as Milledge and Patti said, whether it's, making impact back, into our world, our communities, or if it's doing things that we enjoy for ourselves, we have to find that balance and a purpose to keep us going, to fuel our tank, to keep us going and to enjoy our lives. It is a long runway. People are retiring earlier. We're living a lot longer, and we want to make sure we really enjoy it, but also plan for it, because the other piece is financially, you want to be prepared for that time period where you don't have to have as much maybe the work structure, but you want to have the financial structure in place to make sure you don't have the stress, because financial stress is detrimental to your well-being and your future, retirement or a resolution plan.
So we're going to put the first poll up now, just to get a sense of where people are on this call, whether they're retired or preparing for retirement or nowhere near thinking about it. But I think it would just be interesting just to capture this. And Milledge and Patti, you were both high-flying execs, incredibly successful, built businesses. How did the book, The Resolutionist, Welcome to the Anti-Retirement Movement, come about? And was it pre you getting to that stage, or once you had sold businesses and then thought, okay, what are we going to do?
We talked about it periodically throughout. So when Patti and I were dating, and then in our married life, we were lucky to spend a third of our nights together because we were both traveling and just, in different parts of the world. And so we were always looking forward to, God, it'd be great if we could live in the same place and be together all the time. And ultimately, what project, do we want to buy a company? What do we want to do together? And so really, instead of selling our businesses and jumping right in, we sold our businesses and said, what's an interesting project that we can work on together like we've always wanted to, and do something. And really the book evolved from that. And while we didn't know exactly what the book was going to be about, we'd had a lot of feedback over the years about our planning process. And in some ways we planned too much according to other people, but really what we did to live our life to the fullest. And so really the book evolved out of that.
Yeah, and I think just to add to that, I made an attempt at retiring at one time in my life and failed. And when then I ended up back, full time in the workforce, living away from Milledge and traveling around the world for my work. And we talked a lot about why it failed. Like, I really had my mind set that I was done, that this was it, and why did it fail? And we really came to the conclusion it failed because we didn't really have a plan, right? I planned for everything from, getting into what university I wanted to go to my career. I mean, you have these plans, but people's plans tend to stop when they retire. So instead of thinking about it that way, like, how do you think about a life plan that takes you all the way to the end and encapsulates what you want to do at this stage of life? And so we knew that if we were going to do it, we're very planning oriented and metric driven. If we didn't have a plan, it would fail again. So that's when we started through the process of designing our resolutions and then testing them as we were exiting. They ended up getting refined quite a bit. It was a trial and error. But the idea really has been with us, I think, for many years.
That's really interesting that you tried it and it didn't work the first time around. And actually, I think it was Susan that commented that, Rebecca commented actually she would add a fourth option to that poll, which is retired from one thing and now in another thing, which seems quite common, and over 50% actually aren't thinking about it. Kathy, in your experience, at what point do you start having conversations about this life stage?
It's interesting. I noticed somebody in the chat put a note in there about we focus too much on financial planning aspects of retirement, not on what we'll actually do when we get there. And I think that's a point well taken. But I also think that financial planning, just like budget and some other words wrapped around finance, have negative connotations for people, or it adds some stress or duress to them. So I think we have to look at it a little bit differently and think about a financial plan, like any sort of plan, as Patti was mentioning, they're planners. I mean, we don't plan, and I've used this analogy before, but I'm going to use it again. We don't just show up at an airport and look for which airlines we're going to get onto for our next trip, and arrive in that destination and hope there's a hotel available for us or a place to stay. We actually like to plan that out, and it's not that, it's really actually part of the fun is in the planning. So if you just look at it, like, change your mindset a little bit. The planning part is important, but of course it's not just about the numbers. And I think that's the point that I think it was Susan was trying to make, that we shouldn't just focus on financial planning. There's so much there. I think people make financial planning too much about the numbers and not about the experience and what their priorities are. So it's changing that mindset, and then also enjoying the process and really taking into account what's important to you. And as Milledge and Patti said, they're doers. They've been super busy, and it's hard to make that transition without some sort of plan or structure attached to it. And I would say that there's a lot of people, whether you were working or volunteering or adding value to your family and helping them become young productive citizens. There's so many different things that people have spent their time on there. And as you said, there was one woman, Susan, I think, who mentioned that she was in the military for 3 decades and then made a switch. Like, that is very cool. And that is what we're talking about, the opportunity to envision, I think, something that is meaningful for you and then creating it.
And to Kathy's point,
Yeah.
we really partnered with our financial planners starting 5 years before we ultimately left full-time work to get to where we are today. And so the person in Kathy's role played, a very critical role in that, and really helped us think through that phase of that part of our life.
Yeah, but I think to that point, I mean, moving into the resolutionist movement is not just for the wealthy; it's for everyone, right? And I think that's a really important message to people who don't have financial planners or don't, do these elaborate investing schemes. I mean, this is for everyone. It really doesn't matter when you find yourself at this point. Your resources reflect your life, and all of your resources, your financial resources, your network, your, everything that you have reflects your life. And so it really now, as you move from generating wealth to applying wealth, which is really what you're doing at this stage, whether it's, philanthropic endeavors, or it's travel, or it's, buying a retirement home, a beach home, or whatever you want to do, or it's just, going to buy a Harley Davidson, right? I mean, it's like really you're now applying resources to really realize some of those dreams that when you were working full time in whatever you did for a living, you just didn't have the time and energy to do.
I have to say, Patti, I love 2 words that you just used there. We usually say you're in the accumulation phase when you're earning money, or then the distribution phase. And those are very passive words. And the words that you used were, repeat those 2 words again of the phases.
Generating wealth and then applying wealth.
And then applying wealth. Love that. I'm going to borrow that.
Yeah.
I love that.
And one of our resolutions is engaging your resources. And while that can include, financial resources, it's also time, energy, effort, your network that we've, spent our careers building, that can really, one phone call can really change the face of an organization. And so
it's a great point. And I love the way that you're talking about your network as a resource as well. I think that's amazing. In your opinion, what are the pros and cons of the anti-retirement movement? So what are some of the upsides and downsides of it?
Yeah, I mean, we'll be hard pressed to find a con, because we actually are loving this stage of life, because we do get to spend our time together. We have more time with our friends and family than we've ever had before. I think my family would tell me I'm a better sister, I'm a better aunt, I'm a kind of better everything, because I actually have time to be in the moment with the people I love and that I care about. So it's hard to find cons. Milledge will always find a few cons in everything, so we'll leave that to him. But for me, the real pros are that you really, the biggest advantage to me is that you really come into contact with who you are as a human being, right? Everything else falls away. You don't have the corner office, you don't have the private secretary, you don't have, a business card with your name on it, all of this time in my life, I've had all these identifiers that were so tied to my identity and my confidence, and they all fall away. So you have this great opportunity to get to know who you are without all of those structural things. Maybe you'll like some things about yourself, maybe you won't. But I think for me, it's just been a great thing to redefine who I am as a person. And I always say to Milledge, when we wake up in the morning, every minute is ours. We can do anything with it we want. And that's both a blessing and a burden, right? And so for me, it's really exposing myself as the true human being. I'm not the CEO, I'm not the boss, I'm not I'm not talking to investors. I'm really just Patti. And I mean, while that was scary, it's good.
Yeah, I mean, it takes a certain person to feel excited and embrace that, Patti. And I think like the way you're describing it, it's almost like you thrive, you like change and you're adapting to it. I can see a lot of people finding that incredibly hard and incredibly scary. And so when you were going into that, do you feel like your mindset shifted, or did you feel scared and then have to shift your mindset? I'm interested in the sort of psychological part of that.
Yeah, so I mean, I honestly can remember, it's like in my brain, like a video that plays over and over again, my very last day when I walked out of the office with all of my things in a box and I put them in my SUV and I was driving to my condo in Las Vegas. And I remember coming to a stop sign and really just crying. I just said, I don't really know who I am. And that really started me on the mission to say, you know, do you want to spend the rest of your life blubbering at the stoplight? Or do you really want to reveal the true you that's inside of all of that? And so it's been a mission with a lot of help from Milledge, honestly.
And then moving more broadly, you asked about the pros, moving more broadly. I mean, the world will be a better place if we have a lot of older, engaged people focused on making the world a better place, passing down their thoughts, their networks, and in a lot of ways, charitable giving. And so I think we need a lot more of that. And I think the opportunity exists for the world to be a better place with this group of people who are not retired, but who are anti-retirement.
I think there's an interesting thing around this sort of notion of philanthropy, and to be a philanthropist, you have to have a certain level of wealth. Whereas I feel like the way you're describing being a resolutionist is actually you can leave a really positive impact on your community or on the world around you. It doesn't necessarily mean you need a family foundation, although you know you may have gone through that. But describe to us sort of some of the activities that you've set up through this stage in life, and how has the sort of philanthropy aspect fed into that?
Yeah, going to Patti's point earlier, you don't have to have a huge bank account or a family foundation to give back. And especially with technology these days, there's so many different ways that even if you're housebound with an internet connection, you can continue to make a positive impact on the world. And that's one of the beautiful things as we think about how this movement is going to go, the impact that technology will have to be able to have conversations like this while it looks like we're all in our homes. And who knows if you're wearing shorts or not underneath, but you can still move, you can still move the world to a better place.
Yeah, and I think to the actual activities, we in our resolutions, we take you through that process because, all people are not created equal. So you have to start with kind of letting go of the past and then starting with really, what is my passion? Like, what makes me happy? What do I like doing? And that can be hikes, right? I mean, one of the things Milledge and I have found that we love doing together is hiking together. We'll pick a topic at the beginning of our hike and talk about it for 2 hours. Sometimes we pick a loved one that we've lost and said, let's hike for the entire 2 hours and talk about that person and remember them and share our memories. And it doesn't cost anything to do that, right? And one of ours 1 month was to say hello and engage a stranger wherever. We can't do that in COVID, but we were doing it before. And we learned a lot from that. I mean, I spent time in a truck stop in San Antonio speaking with, an older truck driver for half an hour. It was so enlightening just to understand his perspective. So I think it really is, you do have to be willing to make yourself vulnerable a bit, kind of put yourself out there. But it doesn't require to write a check every time you really add a new dimension to yourself.
Yeah, I'm going to jump on that too, Julia, if that's okay, and add that, completely agree with that. It's all about what is, what's important to you and different ways of doing it. I know, like, personally, I try to put kindness first always. I think just being kind to somebody else can make an impact in their life, and that doesn't cost me anything, so there's many different ways to make an impact. Jack wrote, does your life purpose change when you retire and not retire? And I would say, I think that what happens is when we go through a transition or we're going to enter a different phase in our life, sometimes we take a step back and we think about it and we give it the time and attention that it deserves in order to understand what's important to us. So I don't necessarily think that your life purpose might be changing. You might just be focusing on it more or recognizing it more. And even as Patti said, pulling up to that stop sign and then just realizing that you're not where you want to be, or you're identifying, you're identifying yourself with a title or a business card and not the person that you are, it's moving, it's impactful. So having the opportunity to stop and think about where you want to be, and you can do this before you think about retirement. You can do this at every point in your life. And some people will make a certain time every day or every week, or the point of going on hikes and having conversations that are meaningful. Those are really great ways to get in better touch with what's important to you and what you want to do with your time. And time, time is so valuable. So how do you want to spend it? I know when we talk to clients, and we do go through a discovery meeting when we have a new client, and there's questions that we ask them that have nothing to do with their money. It has everything to do with them as a person and what their priorities are. And we'll ask them, where do you want to be in 5 or 10 or 15 years? And or what does money mean to you? Not how much money do you have, or what is your greatest personal accomplishment, and what would you like it to be? That has nothing to do really with money. It has everything to do with the inner part of the person and what their passions are. So I would encourage everyone to think about that too.
And Kathy, you make a good point about the plan part of it. And Patti and Milledge, how did you go about making a plan, and how do you go about creating boundaries and setting goals around, well, this is how much time we want to spend on different things?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So Juliet, we talked earlier that we were a little planny, and so every year throughout our marriage, we've had an annual plan. And I think the most, at least for us, the most interesting part about how that annual planning process has changed is we can't measure the same things that we used to measure. Success can't be measured the same way as it was when you had on your annual plan X revenue, X income, X stock price, or whatever it is. So we had to change our metrics or come up with new metrics that allowed us to think about this phase of our life and to be successful in this phase of our life, because we all love to be measured, and or we love to be measured. And so I think that's the case for most everybody. And then moving to the next phase of life, you have fewer metrics or fewer normal metrics than you would otherwise. So we had to come up or think through a way, how are we going to measure happiness? How are we going to measure different things that we couldn't otherwise measure because the old ones fell away?
Yeah, it was a real challenge for us, actually. And because our metrics, for the most part, had been set for us by our shareholders or our bosses or whatever for so many years. And when we went to put our annual plan together, the first year we were both done working full time, we said, wow, we don't need these categories anymore. So we started to really challenge ourselves and say, how do you measure the unmeasurable, right? How do you measure happiness? How do you measure relevance? How do you measure, all of these kinds of, how do you measure continuous learning? Because we were now in a phase where those were the most important things that we had to measure. And so it was, again, trial and error, but we actually found our way to a place where we feel like now we have a good measurement system for this stage of life, which reflects where we're spending our time and what things we're trying to impact.
Yeah. And one of the ways we did it, Juliet, was we would look the year retrospectively and look at the time on our calendar where we had the biggest impact, and whether it was mentoring someone or working with the CEO of a company where I'm chairman, like, where did I feel like I had the biggest impact, and where did I feel like I was doing the most good, and where did I feel the most satisfied? I'm like, okay, I want to do more of that. That's pretty easy. But also looking at the times where I didn't feel useful, I didn't feel good, I didn't feel like I was having impact, and saying, I need to do less of that. And so in some ways that was building a metric system around that as well.
Yeah, you won't get it right the first time.
Yeah,
right.
We still do it every year. So because we still mess up.
I love that. I love a plan. And it's not, and it's interesting because actually I think my husband and I will set kind of goals for the year. We don't necessarily write it down though. And I love meeting people that have such structure. It's amazing.
We have a monthly check-in that my wife does not like at all as to how we're doing on our annual goal list. And we'll highlight it in red, yellow, or green if we've accomplished it. And Patti doesn't love that part as much as I do.
To what extent?
No, I'm sorry, Julie. I was going to say there's something called SMART for goal planning. And we find that people that write their goals down have a much better chance of succeeding in reaching those goals. So if you don't write them down yet, Julia, try it and see how that goes. But what's specific, measurable, achievable, I can't remember what the R is, and then like with a timeline on it. So there's like different
relevant, I think.
Relevant, thank you. Yes, thank you.
She knows it, she just doesn't want to do it.
I do, and we use it in work, and I use it for business goals, but I haven't yet got to the point where my husband and I are like doing the SMART goals together.
Right.
Just give it a year or so and I'll be there.
Yeah.
You should try it. If we put something on our goal list, 96, 97% of the time we accomplish it. And so if it's on the list, we do it.
The other point is that, which I think Milledge had brought up, and somebody in the chat, I think Susie had brought up as well. You know, we tend to do really well with things that we enjoy, and we tend to enjoy doing the things that we are good at, right? So find those areas when you're doing the planning or whatever. Maybe one person is better at writing everything down, another person is better at holding the other one accountable. Like, find where you have that strength and try to apply it there too. What do you think about that, Milledge?
I love that, especially the writing down and the holding accountable part.
And
she's the creative one of the family, thankfully for both of us.
And it's realistic, not relevant. Thank you.
It is realistic.
That's right, realistic, right? Because you don't want to put a goal out there that there's no way to achieve it. You want to put achievable goals, realistic goals.
But one of the things I think that if you look historically at what happens to people at this stage is they tend to begin to lose their confidence, their self-confidence, right? Because they don't feel relevant, they don't feel needed, they don't feel wanted. And if you really look back on how you build your personal self-confidence, a lot of it is built around achievement. Right? You set a goal and you achieve the goal. And so I think this notion of setting goals and writing them down or whatever, however you want to capture them, one of the important parts is to continue to go through life with a level of confidence based on your knowledge that you're actually accomplishing things and you're impacting the world. And so if you live without any kind of metric structure, because you have lived with it your entire life from 5 years old when you got your first report card, right? That was your first metric, and you've lived with this metric system your entire life. You have your annual review at work, you get your bonus, you know how big that is. All these things like boost you, and it's adrenaline. And so if you now think, well, I'm going to live without one of those, you'll find that your confidence and your relevancy will start to wane.
You have a son, right? Yeah. How much do you bring him into these conversations and share your goals with him?
So more than he wants, actually. And so our son and our husband were just visiting us on, what did I say?
Our son and his husband.
Right.
Which was what I said, but that's okay. Our son and his husband were visiting us New Year's Eve, which is when Patti and I take the accumulation of all of our goals and set them in stone, New Year's Eve. So they made the mistake of visiting us that day this year, which they were with us a lot that day. And so we, of course, at lunch had a conversation about what their goals were going to be and sharing some of ours. And then at dinner, we had the same conversation. And then New Year's Day, they woke up and they actually had 5 or 6 interesting goals on their goal list, which was terrific. So we share our goals with them and gave them our sheet. We always have it published on our board over here behind us. So it's very, very open what we're focused on achieving.
Yeah, and some of the things they like and some of the things they don't like, but they did actually put a goal on their list that included us to have a monthly book club as a family, which we thought was a pretty amazing thing to do with your child, right?
That's awesome. I also would say too, a good question to ask yourself during this process is what's working and what's not working, or is that decision helping us move closer to our goals or further away from our goals? Like those sort of things can be helpful too. And then creating, shared goals like a family book group. That's pretty amazing. That's awesome.
That's pretty cool. So one thing we had on our goal list one year was a couple of years ago we asked Dustin and his husband, John, if they could change anything about us, what would it be? And so we gave them 24 hours to think about it. We promised them there would be no repercussions. We weren't committing to change it, but we would definitely listen. And if we thought we could change it, if it was worth changing, we would. And so we've recommended that to a number of our friends. It was a terrific, interesting conversation, and we still reflect back on it.
Yeah, we got to see ourselves through their eyes.
I'm now like, what did they say? What did they possibly
they only had one thing, which I think they were lying a bit, but their one thing was that Milledge and I are massively active all the time. So this was when we were living in London. They were visiting us when we invited this discussion, and we lived on the 4th floor and we never took the elevator. And they said, oh my gosh, you guys, and then you say, let's go to a movie. You want to go to a movie? And they say yes. And we say, well, it's a 3-mile walk to the movie and it's a 3-mile walk home. And so their whole thing was that, we were, on the one hand, it drove them crazy, but they said, we also love the fact that you're staying in shape and healthy and you're going to be here for a long time. So we had a long discussion about it. Then a little bit later, my son-in-law comes kind of skulking into the room and he's like, we came up with a second one.
And we said, no, we're done.
The invitation's over. And it was that we keep the house twofold. So it wasn't all that profound, but it really did generate an amazing dinner discussion.
And it really has opened the dialogue between the 4 of us. If there's something that someone can improve on, to bring it up and have a conversation about it. And it's moved us forward as 4 of us, which is nice.
And in the book, you list out, I think, is it 12 resolutions?
Yeah.
Share with us what those are, because that's quite practical, I think, for anyone that's sort of becoming a resolutionist or having heard this, it wants to become a resolutionist and embrace the anti-retirement movement.
Yeah. So
okay, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. Anyway, so I'll share one and then I'll let Millie share one. I mean, they're very practical things like rip the Band-Aid off and, get comfortable with the uncomfortable, try some new things, become your own best friend, right? Be committed to doing some things alone. Don't wait for a crowd to do them with you. If you have things you want to do, go for it. But one of the ones we have actually found resonates the most with people and that we've done some workshops around is create a new elevator pitch for yourself. And this came about from an event Milledge and I went to when we lived in London, and we were going around introducing ourselves and talking about my start in telecommunications and then I went here and then I did this, and Milledge talking about his banking thing. And the conversations as we were walking home, we said, we don't feel very good about the conversations we're having at these events. I don't want to talk about when I started in telecommunications and when I made my way to my first CEO and when I did an IPO. I want to talk about what I'm doing today. So we ended up rewriting. We said, we're going to write our resolutionist and start with one phrase that says, after a long career in technology, and then I'm only going to talk about what I'm doing now. And so that we wrote these, and then we went to an event and we tried them out. And we found that the conversations were so much more engaging. They were really about what we're doing now, right? Because we weren't sharing with people the current Patti. We were talking about the historic Patti. And so now one of ours at the time was that we were watching all the James Bond movies in chronological order. Not because we love James Bond, but we really wanted to walk through pop culture from the beginning of James Bond till today. The role of women, the role of drinking, the role of smoking, the clothes, the music. So we said this, and that ended up being the entire night's conversation. Everybody wanted to talk about their favorite James Bond, and it really does cut across socioeconomic things. Not everybody can relate to being a CEO, but everybody can relate to watching a James Bond movie. So now we've done some workshops with people who felt like they don't even have an elevator pitch, and they go away from the workshop with an elevator pitch that reflects their current them. So that's, I think, an important one.
That goes to your confidence point as well, Patti, because I think someone on the chat mentioned there's this moment where you meet someone and they're like, what do you do? And you suddenly, it sort of goes to your sort of status and your role. And so actually kind of rethinking, after a long career in X, I'm now doing this, sort of, I think just sort of reestablishes and resets that for you.
Yeah, because you're really saying that your best life is behind you. If all you're doing is talking about that, right? You're reinforcing this notion of retirement and that your best life is behind you. And in fact, you're living it.
And in a lot of ways, if someone asks you what you're doing, you talk about a job 3 jobs ago, that makes no sense. It's the same thing in this phase of your life. And also we use it as a way for perspective, meaning what we're doing going forward. So as an example, sometimes I'll say, and I'm well on my way to our goal, our lifetime goal list of visiting 100 countries, which just opens up this broad conversation. What's your favorite country? Have you been here? What's your favorite trip and things like that. And so instead of talking about banking, which is totally boring, sorry, Kathy, you're in the cool part of banking. My part of banking was totally boring. What are we doing now and what are we doing in the future and what trips are on our list as an example?
I'll clarify that and say I totally get that. And that's why my part is I work with individuals and families. So I get the fun part of banking, which is personal relationships, developing those relationships, making a positive impact on people's lives, and talking about all of these things is what I do all day long, helping clients figure out all of these questions. So I don't take offense to that. I totally get that. I love my job. It doesn't feel like work.
Great.
Yeah, but I think it is really important to be in the moment with people, right? And that's, I mean, it makes you feel good about the work you're doing when people are asking me about the soccer universe or the American Conservatory Theater in San Francisco. That's what I'm in every day. So I'd much rather have a conversation with you about that than about the IPO I did 20 years ago.
And so, Juliet, that was one. And so another one of the resolutions is rip the Band-Aid off. And we talk about ripping the Band-Aid off as a dramatic change between your full-time work life and what your next life is going to be. And a number of our friends, as an example, an attorney friend of ours worked 40 years at a firm, and he retired from the firm, and he kept going back to the office every day to clean up matters and to do some paperwork or whatever. 6 months later, he was still going to the office every single day. And so there was really no change. And so what Patti and I did, effectively within a month of when the sale of her business closed and after I was leaving my thing, we moved to London, where we knew very few people. It was a place we knew and we loved. So we lived in London for 2 years as a break from being in Silicon Valley all day, every day, taking meetings, looking at deals, thinking about things. We moved someplace new and different as a way to change the trajectory of our life from that point forward. And while moving to London's a big and dramatic one, for us, it was what we needed. But it could be anything from, taking a long vacation to not going, not reading all the newsletters you used to read, not going to the office every day, not having the lunch with your former workers all the time. It's like, how do you go to a different phase of life and creating a bridge there?
Yeah, I think it's really important. I mean, that notion of ripping the Band-Aid off and getting out of the sphere that you've been in forever, whether it's, we see people who retire and then they go back to their industry trade shows. We're like, why are you going there? It's like, and then they remember all the things they miss instead of saying, now I can apply that time to new and different things that really inspire me now. And I do think it's really important. It doesn't mean you have to move to London. We were fortunate to be able to do that. But you can really, we have a friend who left the tech space and she went back to school to get a medical degree. You talk about ripping the Band-Aid off. I mean, she's in a classroom with 20-year-olds every day at, 58 years old. And
studying until midnight.
Yeah, studying until midnight. So she didn't have the time really to be reflecting every day on everything she missed because she was reinventing herself.
It's such great advice. I feel like this sort of anti-retirement movement is quite revolutionary, and it sort of I don't. Would you think that it's not really been an idea that's been explored enough? And do you think this would have worked 10 or 20 years ago, or is there a certain sort of moment in life and in the world where you feel like this is sort of more accepted and more people are thinking in this way?
Yeah, I'm not convinced it would have worked 10 or 20 years ago. I think we're at a tipping point right now where we over the past 100 years, we've added 30 years to our lifespans. And all of those years are what was in quote unquote retirement time. And so what are you going to do with those 30 years? So I think we have a large number of people coming into that age. We're living longer and we're living healthier longer as well, which I think is a big component of it. And we have a big mass of people coming through over the next 10 years that are energetic, want to give back, and are interested. And another key thing is technology, which has dramatically changed the world, especially under COVID now. We realize how impactful technology is, which allows these people, even if you're housebound, to continue to relate to others on the outside and to continue giving back. So I think it's a now time going forward instead of it wasn't something 20 years ago.
Yeah.
We try to say one quick thing before you head there. We try to say this is not your parents' retirement. And my parents are actually resolutionists.
They're the best example of resolutionists. We're so lucky to have them in our life.
The best example of resolutionists, without a doubt. Even though they're 80 and 87 now, they say they are never going to retire. But effectively, they've been resolutionists for the past 30 years, but they, because they're totally anti-retirement and say they're going to go into their grave with their boots on. So I'll turn it over to you because you were going to add something.
I mean, I think a movement requires mass, right? That is how you define movements, whether it's the women's movement, civil rights movement, kind of whatever. And I think you have this baby boomer generation reaching this retirement age, coupled with the fact that this generation was the largest generator of wealth in any generation in history. You have people generating wealth much earlier in their life, and you have the advancement of medicine. It's allowing us to live longer. So I think you have this great collision of a lot of things that makes this the perfect time for us to redefine and erase the social stigma, frankly, right? I mean, we shouldn't have mandatory retirement ages at 60 for some of these partner firms, right? We shouldn't have mandatory age outs at 72 on boards. I mean, this is this enormous brain mass that is moving into this stage with amazing wisdom and experience. And to think that you're just going to put it out to pasture, I think would be a real shame.
Have you noticed in your research any cultural differences? Because I would think this movement it could well be a global movement, but what have you discovered in sort of being and working and having friends in a network in other countries?
Go ahead. Yeah, based on our research, we think it can and should be a global movement. We have friends like you all over the world who are reading the book and saying, yeah, this makes sense. This is a great phase of life as I move from full-time work to really being able to stay active, engaged, and continually learning.
Yeah, I think there are some cultures, though, that have appreciated and respected the elders probably different than we do in the US, right? And so, I think that there is an ageism problem in our country. There's just absolutely no question. I think we have really felt it in the last 5 years, where people kind of look at the age that comes after your name and they make assumptions about your energy level, about your willingness to work hard, about, your willingness to be creative. And I think that social stigma needs to go away. Milledge and I host salons in our home, the old French style salons where we gather people together that are no longer working, and we bring in expert speakers and we learn together. And I'm telling you that these brains of these people that are retired, you can learn a lot from these people. I mean, they have not only wisdom, but they have experience. And I think it's a great time to change not only social stigma, but policies in our country that allow this group of people to continue to give back to their country.
I also think there is there's a level of confidence and experience that comes with age that actually really supports real impact and change. And I was having a conversation with someone about Biden yesterday, and it's almost like some of the immediate changes are very much leading with conviction and a kind of like, well, I've got nothing to lose. Why wouldn't I just kind of do what I think? Which I think is very different to sort of what we've experienced over the past 4 or 5 years. And I just think that's quite interesting, where there's a leader, he's older, but actually you kind of think the experience that the life experience that comes with is actually a real blessing in some ways.
Agreed. I mean, I think you're seeing it in Washington, right? In the House, the Senate, the White House. I mean, we're finding, and I think to some degree that's part of breaking the social stigma that we're about with our anti-retirement movement, that this is, my grandmother used to say to me when I was very young and I thought I knew everything, that Patti, people who are older are wiser for a reason. And I think that it's actually true. I mean, when you get to this stage, because there is a combination of, hey, I've seen this before, so, I know what to do with it. And I also don't overreact to cycles in life because you've lived through them. So I think putting this brain mass of people coming into the anti-retirement movement to work for our country, for philanthropy, for our corporations, for our next generation coming up is what we're hoping we will find on the back end of this.
How do you see the anti-retirement movement evolving in the future?
Oh, you, babe.
No, you take it.
No, you take it.
He doesn't ever want me to go first until he wants me to go first. Yeah, I mean, our hope is, this is really, we've written this book, but this has never been about the book. This is really about a movement. And we're, like I said, hosting these salons in our home. In our book, we give you the tools to host them yourself. I mean, what we would love to see is an aggregation of people at this stage that are supporting one another, that are continuing to learn together, explore together, travel together, and really be there for one another and really start to push the social stigma aside and address some of the policy issues in our country that really attempt to write off this group of people. And I think that's, if we could say what's our bold goal, it would be that we will find ourselves 10 years from now with a different view. I mean, if, we don't want to say to someone we're retired and have them conjure up this view of, my mother in a house dress, which is what I had as my view, right? And I don't want the world to think about us that way. So let's see if we can move the needle a bit.
Yeah. And from a smaller goal perspective, so many of the ideas in this book we've gotten from our friends and people we've met throughout our travels. And so if any of these tools, ideas can help an individual in the world, then it was totally worth it.
Yeah. It's such an amazing vision and it's so inspiring. And you can kind of, you as a couple, I think, are, it looks like you're kind of enjoying this moment so much. And I think the level of sort of self-awareness that you have around who you are and embracing that is a brilliant lesson for us all. Kathy, I know you've got a question or a comment, and then I'd love to sort of close on advice for anyone, from all of you, advice on anyone trying to stay productive after retirement or that wants to embrace this movement. Kathy, did you have a question?
I don't have a question, but I will say, Milledge and Patti, I think what you're doing is great. I think that you've captured what a lot of people are experiencing and feeling already, and formalizing it and giving people the opportunity, if they haven't considered it, to consider it and move forward with that. And those that have, to see that there's maybe a bigger movement out there. So it does become a movement rather than multiple people one-off making these type of decisions. I really love that. I think that's important. So that was really just a comment that I had. This was a really, really interesting and engaging conversation. I can't wait to read the book.
Yeah.
Thank you, Kathy. And to close, Patti and Milledge, what advice would you give to anyone thinking at this life stage or thinking through this?
Yeah, so I'll start. I would say, if you're heading towards this phase, do a better job of planning than we did when we first entered retirement. So do a better job planning. But I think one of the key messages from the book, if you think it and it sounds interesting, try it. Try new things. You never know what you're going to be passionate about. And so one of the things Patti and I are doing this year, we plan to learn one new thing every single month. And we don't even know what those things are. And so we just want to continue to try new and interesting things. And that's one of the things that I would encourage everyone.
Yeah, I would first encourage everyone to read the book, because I think it's really a workbook approach. It's not preachy. It's really about, at the end of every chapter, we have a give it a try, where you actually try to apply the tools that we've talked about, and share it with your friends. But I would say start with not defining yourself based on historic measures of how you define yourself, and saying, open yourself up to being whoever you want to be at this stage of your life, and not being embarrassed. Think of retirement as a badge of honor, right? This is like something you work towards your entire life, and shouldn't be something that you're embarrassed to say to people, but that you should be proud to say, I have accomplished so much that I now have given myself permission to enter this phase.
Thank you, all of you, Patti, Milledge and Kathy. It is such a wonderful and refreshing discussion, and I feel privileged to have been part of it. And I'm definitely going to try and get my SMART goals written down. That's like a goal. A special thank you as well to Kathy Entwistle, Private Wealth Advisor at Morgan Stanley, for being our partner for this series. And most importantly, thanks to all of you that joined us today. For your great comments and questions. We will be sharing the replay of this in our newsletter on Sunday as well. Please do share any feedback with us. We'd love to hear your comments. You can email us at community@worth.com. We will also reshare the link to the book, which you can find on Amazon is the chosen platform, which I think Molly has already shared, and we'll share again. Also join us next week at the same time, Thursday, February 4th at 12 p.m. We'll be joined by Kathy Entwistle and Shannon Bishop Arvin, President and CEO of Keeneland, where we'll be discussing how the past year has impacted horse racing, what we can expect from the sport in the future, and what it means for Shannon to be the first woman to serve as President and CEO of the racetrack. Register for this on worth.com/events. And in the meantime, stay well, stay healthy, be kind, and enjoy the rest of your week. And thanks again, Milledge and Patti and Kathy, for a great discussion.
Thank you.
Julia.
Thanks so much.
Milledge and Patti.